Hi everyone, welcome to Lola's Frugal Life. This is episode number 81. Today we're going to be talking about tips for storing your food. So please just stick around for a few quick words from our sponsor and we'll get right into the episode.
TIAA is on a mission. Why? Because 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So in collaboration with big-name artists like Wyclef Jean, TIAA released Paper Right. New music inspiring a new financial future. With 100% of streaming sales going to a nonprofit that teaches students how to invest. Stream Paper Right now and help close the gap.
Okay, so hi everyone. Today we're going to be talking about tips for storing your food. But before we get into the topic, first I want to share, like I always do on my Monday episodes, my frugal tip of the week. So this week's tip is just to make sure that you negotiate any bills that you can. And the reason I thought of this is because we have a satellite radio service for one of our vehicles. And every year, well, actually the first year I did this, I really was going to cancel because the service cost was too high, I thought, for how much we were using it. So I had called to cancel. Legitimately, I was really going to cancel. I wasn't using the tactic to try and get money off. And I called to cancel, and they offered me half off of the annual fee. So I was like, all right, well, I guess we'll keep it one more year. And then the next year came around, and it was back to the high amount again. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to do this. So I called to cancel again. And again, they offered me half off. So then I realized, okay, it seems like if I just call, they'll give me half off. So why wouldn't I just call? So every year I call, and at first I was saying I wanted to cancel every year, and then they would give me half off. And then in more recent years, the woman that I spoke to, she just kind of said, if you've been a customer for a long time, if you just call and say I'm looking to get upgraded to the most recent promotion that's going on, they'll just upgrade you. So it wasn't really because I said I was canceling. You can basically just call and ask for, to get the current promotion because you've been a customer for a long time. So every year it's probably got to be going on, like, I feel like it's been 6 or 7 years. Every year I've called and I get half off of what I was going to be billed. So just think about it. Like, if I hadn't called, I would have paid double the amount for like all of those years. So that's my frugal tip of the week. If you have anything like that type of service or anything that you might be able to, call to negotiate, it's usually, I guess, like the types of services that kind of run promotions and offer discounts and things like that. But it doesn't hurt to try with anything else. So just think about some of your bills and, just see if maybe there might be some opportunity to call and ask if you can get a better rate. So that's that. So now let's talk about food storage tips. So the reason I wanted to talk about food storage tips is because, storing your food properly is really important because of the fact if it goes bad, you wasted a lot of money on purchasing all that food that you're never going to be able to use. And besides for the money, I mean, who likes to waste food anyway? Like, it always feels bad to waste food. And the fact that you paid money for it makes it even worse because now you're going to have to repurchase food and you already spent money on that food that you could have eaten. So it's really important to store your food properly so that you can use it before it goes bad. So I just found some different tips. Some of them are things I use. Some of them are some things that I just found that I hadn't necessarily done before. So I was just going to kind of share with you the things that I had found and the tips that I have of what I do when I store my food. So I guess first we could talk about produce. So the one thing I saw, which I didn't really know, but I kind of heard sort of about, was it says you can't store root vegetables and onions together. So like, for example, potatoes and onions. If you put potatoes and onions together, they produce gases that make each other spoil faster. So you want to keep those separate. Potatoes, you're actually supposed to store in a cool, dry area, like maybe in your basement or in your garage. They say not to store them in the fridge, and you're not supposed to store them where it's light. Although I do have to say, I actually keep mine in like a basket on the counter because we go through potatoes really quickly. So that's something to keep in mind too. Like, how fast do you use the food? That's going to determine how strict you need to be about following the rules of storing it, and if you're going to need to make it last longer or not. This is a new one that I saw, and I keep seeing it now. I've seen it on a YouTube channel that I watch, and then I saw it come up, I think, when I was looking for some other food storage tips, and I saw it somewhere else too. And you may already know this. Oh, another reason why I'm remembering too that it came up sort of is because I bought a bunch of bananas from BJ's, and I noticed when I brought them home that, like, the little, what do they call it, the crown, like where the bunch of bananas kind of starts, the little top part where all the bananas come off from, it was wrapped in plastic wrap. Like, when I bought it, it had like this little tiny plastic thing like wrapped around that part. And I was like, oh, that's so funny, because I just saw a YouTube video, and one of the things she said was that she wraps foil or plastic wrap around that part of the bananas, because what it does is it stops the it slows it down from releasing the ethylene gas. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that properly, but that gas is what helps them ripen, I guess. So by putting the wrap there, it stops it from ripening too quickly. So I thought that was kind of an interesting tip, and I haven't tried it yet, but I've seen it a bunch of times now. So I'm going to try that very soon and see how it works out. Also, if you have bananas and they do start to get too ripe, I usually just stick them in the freezer. Either I will peel them and put them in a baggie and stick them in a freezer, or I've also just frozen them in a baggie with these, like, without peeling them. I don't know if there's a certain way you're supposed to do it. Usually I'll peel them if I'm not in a hurry, but if I'm in a hurry and I just want to get them, like, put away in the freezer right away so that they don't rot, I'll just kind of stick them in a bag and throw them in there. But they're really good to use in like a smoothie, or like a recipe that calls for like mashed bananas, like banana bread, or I make a healthy cookie that's just literally mashed up bananas, some oats. It's like two ripe bananas, 1 cup of quick oats, and like a 1/4 cup of chocolate chips, and you bake it at, I think, 400 for 15 minutes, and they come out really good. Not that this was an episode to share recipes, but I just thought of it. It's such a quick, easy, healthy cookie recipe, and it comes out so good. My kids love it. But I'll do that with like bananas if they need to be used up, if they're starting to get too ripe, or I'll take frozen ones that were going to get too ripe out of the freezer and make that recipe. So anyway, green leafy vegetables and lettuce. If you put a paper towel in with them and make sure that they have air too, that will help keep them fresh longer. You don't want them to get like that moisture, because it winds up making them get like that slimy stuff, and they just get kind of gross. So keeping a paper towel in there will keep out the moisture, which will help keep them fresh longer. For berries, you can wash them in a water and vinegar bath to kill the bacteria, and that prevents mold. My kids were actually just recently doing this. They saw some video or something going around about where if you put strawberries in like a vinegar and water bath, like these little bugs would come out. And little things did come out that looked like bugs. I'm not totally sure if they were actually bugs or not. They were just like little tiny things. But anyway, it does work to wash the berries like that, and it's supposed to make them last a lot longer. And I would imagine it does, because you figure if you're killing whatever stuff is on the outside of them, it would help them, not go moldy as quickly. Another produce tip. I don't have too many produce tips, so sorry. If you want more, just let me know, and I will try and see what more I can find if there's any particular produce that you have an issue with storing. I usually try and use produce very quickly. Like if I buy it, I try and use the things that go bad the quickest as soon as I get them. Like I kind of plan my meals in that way, and then the things that last longer are planned for later in the week. So I don't really spend too much time really worrying about how I'm storing the produce, but I do follow these few little tips. But anyway, avocados. If this is something that you eat, you'll know that when you put them on the counter, and they will continue to ripen if they're too hard when you get them. But if you've ever left them on the counter for a very short time past when they've got to their peak ripeness, they'll start to rot very quickly. So what I do is I put them on the counter until they're right at like that perfect ripeness, and then stick them in the fridge. And when you stick them in the fridge, it stops them from ripening, and they'll stay that way for at least a few days. They last much longer in the fridge. I've even gone probably like close to 4 or 5 days after they were fully ripe with them in the fridge. And it's really just, it works really well for avocados. So, okay, so now I want to talk about freezing foods, because freezing foods for me is probably the biggest way that I use to store food to keep it from going bad. So one of the things that's really important is to freeze your foods in the appropriate portions. If you buy like a bulk package of ground beef, but you're only going to use like 1 pound, say, at a time, you want to make sure that you separate it into portions that you can easily pull out that are going to be in the size that you're going to want to use. Because if you have this big chunk of ground beef in the freezer, that's way more than you want to use for your recipe, you're never going to want to pull it out, and chances are it might wind up just sitting in there until it winds up going bad, because it's going to be very difficult for you to pull it out and have a use for that much of the meat. You definitely want to freeze in portion sizes. And the same thing goes for even things like chicken legs or sausage or anything like that. You might think they would be easier to separate, but they're actually pretty hard to get apart once they're frozen. So you want to make it as easy as possible to just quickly pull stuff out of the freezer and use it. You also want to make sure to store them, like to wrap them properly or put them in a freezer container when you put them in, like a container that's like safe for the freezer when you put them in there. But that's kind of depending on how much time they're going to be in the freezer. Like, for example, when I freeze bread, I actually just throw it in the freezer right in the bag that the bread comes in. Like, even with the little twisty thing at the end, I just throw the whole loaf of bread right in there because I know it's not going to be in there very long. We go through bread quickly, and I do buy bread once a week, but the second I get it, I just toss it in the freezer. That way I don't have to worry about it going bad at all, even though I know we're going to use it quickly. If 1 week we use less than normal or whatever, it's just in the freezer and it's fine. But I know it's going to be used within a week or two, so I don't really worry too much about how it's stored. But definitely more care is needed for things that you're going to keep in the freezer longer, because if I threw bread in the freezer and it was kept in there for a really long time in those bags, I don't think it would do too well. So let's see. But you do want to plan to use your food that you're putting in the freezer. Like, you want to have a plan for it. You don't want to just store stuff in the freezer with no time in mind when you plan to use it, because things will go bad for staying in there too long. So, they last a pretty long time, but you do want to make sure that they're not just going in there like to use whenever at some point in the future. You should have some kind of a plan and kind of keep like a rotation going so that you're using up what was in there the longest, and then the newer stuff that you're buying, you're putting below that so that you use that up next after you've used what was in there the longest first. Let's see. And just make sure to keep in mind like what's in your freezer so that you can include it in your meal plan. Like, it's the worst thing to find something at the bottom of your freezer that's now freezer burned and you can't use it anymore because you forgot you put it in there. So a lot of times what I'll do is when I'm putting groceries away, I'll just kind of take a look and see what's in there and make sure that there's nothing in there that's been forgotten. And if there is, I'll make sure to get it on a meal plan right away so that it gets used up. So one thing I do that makes it really easy for me to see what's in the freezer that I used to struggle with is we have a chest freezer, and this would work for most regular freezers too if you're storing meat or anything that you're freezing in like portions. I use the reusable grocery bags to portion things out by food type. So like, for example, I'll have one bag which is like just like, say, chicken, one bag that's like just maybe ground beef, One bag might be ground turkey. I have probably like maybe 4 or 5 different bags, and I kind of sort the things out like that. Because what used to happen is, in the chest freezer at least, things would come in, they would go in there, and everything was just kind of piled on top of everything, and it was so hard to find things and get things out, and that's where I would wind up, where something would wind up being left at the bottom and I would never see it, and then it'd get wasted. So by using these freezers, the food grocery bags, the reusable grocery bags, I'm able to pull out the entire bag with the stuff in it and get to what's underneath. So like I'll just quickly, easily pull out, say like maybe the chicken bag, the ground beef bag, the whatever bag, and just pull them right out of the freezer and place them down on the floor, and then I can get to whatever say I'm looking for pork chops or whatever, which is another bag. I can get to that bag, and within that bag, there's not too many things. Maybe there's like, say if it's like chicken breast or something, maybe I could see, okay, I have 2 or 3 packages of chicken breast in here. So I could see exactly what I have, and nothing gets lost that way in the freezer. So I heard that tip on some maybe Facebook group I was on or whatever, and I started doing it, and it worked out really, really well to keep the freezer organized so that I could always see what's in there, and I don't have that problem where everything just kind of gets piled on top and you can't tell what's in there. Oh yeah, and another thing, make sure that you label your food that you're putting in a storage bag or plastic container, because trust me, as much as you think it looks like you'll be able to tell what it is, once it's frozen, sometimes it's really hard to remember what that thing was, or even tell by looking at it what it is. So it's really important to label the foods that you're going to freeze. So those are like the main kind of freezing tips that I have. I also want to talk about some other things that you can freeze that you might not know that you can freeze. So milk, you can definitely freeze. This is kind of an odd one, but I recently, within the last couple of months, had to freeze a ton of milk because my neighbor was getting milk from the school, and sorry, this happens every time I have to let my dogs out. Oh, one of them's going out, the other one's not. She was getting milk from the school because her son was getting school lunches, and since the schools were closed, she was able to go once a week to pick up his lunches for the week. But the milk that they gave wasn't milk that they would drink in their house, but they had to take it. It was just kind of part of the deal. They just gave you the food, and the milk was part of it. So she had given us this milk because we use it. It was like 1% milk or whatever, but they don't use it. So, but every week she kept giving us all these milks, and I was like, what the heck am I going to do with all this milk? So I started freezing the little, it was just like those little milk cartons like you would get in school. I would put like, say, 6 of them in like a Ziploc bag and stick them in the freezer, and I kept accumulating them because I did see that you could freeze milk, so I knew it was okay, but I had never done it before. And then what I wound up doing is like every day I would take out just like 1 or 2 of them and stick them in the fridge. They did take a while to defrost. Even those little tiny containers, I would say it took like 2 to 3 days sometimes to defrost once they were in the fridge. But once they defrosted, they were fine. So I've been going through them still. I'm just about almost to the end of them, but every day I'll take out like 1 or 2 and then let it defrost, and then I just use it. I do use it right away because I don't really know how long it had left when I froze it, because you can't really go by the dates anymore, because the date on the milk obviously pertained to when it was fresh. So I use them pretty quickly, but I haven't had any problems. They've all been fresh. Nothing's like weird or texture or anything like that. So anyway, milk is good to freeze. Cheese is definitely good to freeze. There's certain things you can't freeze. Well, at least I've read that you shouldn't freeze, like fresh cheeses, like softer cheeses, like fresh mozzarella, regatta, cottage cheese, that type of thing. But I buy shredded cheddar and shredded mozzarella usually every week in my grocery shopping, and that's another thing that goes straight into the freezer. I have a little bin where I keep shredded cheeses, and I pull the ones that are in there already to the front of the bin, and I put the new ones to the back, and that way I know I'm always using the oldest ones first, and they freeze really well. I take it out in the morning if I'm cooking a recipe that uses it at night, and I just defrost it, and it's perfect. So I never have to worry about the cheese going bad. You can also freeze butter. Another good thing to freeze if you have kids, or even if you just want like a quick meal or snack for yourself, is homemade pancakes. You can just put them in Ziploc baggies and freeze them, and they reheat really well in the microwave. Cookies. At the holidays, we will make a ton of cookies, and you don't want like all those cookies sitting out where you're just going to constantly keep eating them. So what we'll do is we'll put some in like a cookie jar, and then we'll take like portions and save them in like quart size freezer bags. So they're like kind of little portions you could take out, and cookies freeze really well. I'm guessing obviously it depends on the type of cookie, but we usually make like chocolate chip cookie type generally, like the Toll House cookies, Toll House chocolate chip cookies, and they definitely freeze really well. And they're actually really good like partially frozen too. If you just take them out of the freezer and you eat them when they're still like almost frozen, they're really good like that too. Muffins, I've made muffins for the kids, like big batches of them, and froze them in portions, and then just take out a few here and there. So those freeze really well. Again, length of time matters. Try and make sure you're going to use them within a reasonable amount of time, because I'm sure if you stored muffins and they were kept in there for too long, they would start to kind of get freezer burn. So just think about the time. Another thing I freeze a lot is leftover taco meat. I used to actually purposely make a big batch of taco meat and then divide it into portions and freeze one for another meal. That's actually a really good simple, to make a simple meal, quick meal. I haven't really been doing that too much anymore, but if I do have leftovers, I will freeze it so that I can use it for like another meal, or just kind of make like taco pizza or something like that with it. Deli ham is another thing you can freeze. Sorry, letting the dog in now. The only thing that I have found is that it seems like water, when you defrost it again, like some water comes out of it, I guess from being frozen. So I don't use it for sandwiches, like regular sandwiches, if I freeze it. And the only reason I usually freeze it is I don't purposely freeze deli ham. But say if I bought some lunch meat and I'm like, okay, it's kind of at that point where it's like, if we don't eat this today, it's going to start to get to the point where it's going to have to get thrown out. So if that day comes and we haven't eaten it, I'll put it in a Ziploc baggie and I'll stick it in the freezer. And then what I'll do is, say if like I'm making grilled cheese sandwiches with soup one night for dinner or something like that, I'll defrost that ham, and then I'll just kind of take like a paper towel and just kind of get any of the extra moisture off of it. And I'll put it on the grilled cheese sandwiches. So I'll do like grilled ham and cheese, and it comes out really good like that, and then it doesn't get wasted. So that's that. Sauce, you can definitely freeze. I used to make batches of sauce and freeze them. I haven't done that in a while again. I have kind of gotten out of the whole freezer meal prep thing a little bit. I do want to get back into it at some point, but right now I'm just using my regular meal plans and just buying things as I need them each week. But definitely sauce. You could do meat sauce, regular sauce without meat. And I used to like to freeze it in a Ziploc bag and lay it flat and freeze it so it doesn't take up too much space in the freezer. Tomato paste, I've seen this tip so many times. You know how you have a recipe and it'll call for like 1 tablespoon of tomato paste, and you're like, well, what am I going to do with the rest of the can? So you can freeze it. You can actually even freeze it in those portion sizes so that you can use it for recipes as needed. But a different tip is, I don't actually do that, because I found another tip where you can use ketchup instead of tomato paste as a substitute in those recipes that call for like a tablespoon of tomato paste. And I've been doing that ever since, because I just never want to open up a can of tomato paste to use 1 tablespoon, even though I could freeze it. So just a tip, if you don't want to have to bother with freezing that tomato paste, you might want to try the ketchup instead of tomato paste substitute. I've never had an issue where a recipe tasted weird because I used ketchup instead of tomato paste for that part of the recipe. So that's that. Soups, you could definitely freeze soups. Not like milk-based ones, like not like creamy, like chowder type soups, that they do tend to separate. And you definitely don't want to freeze soups that have noodles in them. But what I usually do, just as a general tip anyway, for storing leftover soup that has noodles as part of the soup, is that I don't put the noodles in the soup when I make it. I keep them separate, and everyone can add the noodles as they want. And then I even keep them in a separate Ziploc container in the fridge separate from the soup. That way you don't get like where the noodles soak up like all the juice from the soup, and then you just have like this big soggy noodle mess. So that's just a tip too. But the soup works to freeze it. Also, if you just put that in a Ziploc baggie or a container, and then you could just defrost it and then make noodles on the side and then just add them to your soup if it's that type of a soup. Rice, you can cook rice and freeze it. That's really good if you want to do like a quick stir fry meal or whatever type of meal, or add to soup or anything like that. And then definitely, like I mentioned before, bread, hamburger buns, hot dog buns, those always go right in the freezer in my house, and I just pull them the night out before I need them. Again, I'm usually buying them for the upcoming week, so I do just toss them in right in the bags that they come in. But it's really good because I just don't have to worry about them going bad or anything like that. Okay, so those are like all like my freezer tips. So I know this episode is mostly freezer tips, but that's kind of a lot of the food storage that I use to keep things fresh so that things don't go bad. I did have a couple of miscellaneous other tips that I wanted to share. They're just kind of random, but one thing that I'll do in the summertime is before, like if I know I'm going to do like grilled chicken or a steak on the grill or even under the broiler or whatever, when I put it in the bag to freeze it, I'll put it in like a Ziploc bag to freeze it, and I'll actually marinate it right then. I'll put the marinade in the bag, put the meat in, like swish it around, seal it up, and put it in the freezer that way. And then that way when I take it out to defrost it, by the time it's done defrosting, it's already marinated too, and then I can just throw it on the grill really quick. So I just think that's really simple, quick way to have a quick dinner ready, something you could just pull out, defrost, and then cook. So that's that. What else was there? I'm sorry, I already said this. I wrote a note to make sure I mentioned about putting the things in order of the newest ones first, but I think I already did mention that. Oh, another thing I saw was to store dairy at the back of the fridge where it's the coldest. Like they always say you're not supposed to keep your milk in the door of the fridge, where they always have that spot to put your milk. But I do have to say, I do store it in the door. My family goes through milk really quickly, so I really don't worry about it too much. But if you don't go through milk very quickly, you might want to consider maybe storing it at the back of the fridge because it's supposed to be the coldest there and it'll stay the freshest longest. Let's see. What else? Oh, yeah. If you do have meat items or anything else that you don't think you're going to use right away that do need to be frozen, I suggest freezing them like as soon as you get home from the grocery store, like while you're putting your groceries away, just divide them up right then and get them right into the freezer. That way you don't have to deal with it later. It's just so much easier. So that's it. Those are all my food storage tips. Hopefully maybe there was one or two things in here that you didn't know or that might be helpful. But like I said, food storage is so important because you don't want to spend money on food and then let it go to waste. So just really keep in mind and try and plan to make sure that you're going to be using what you purchased within a reasonable amount of time so you don't have to store food for too long. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please reach out to me on Facebook if you have any comments or questions or episode suggestions. You can reach me at facebook.com/Lola's Frugal Life. You can also join our private listeners group, which there's a link to the group on that Facebook page, or you can also go directly to facebook.com/groups/Lola's Frugal Life and submit a request to join there. We talk about things that are relevant to the show, topics on meal planning, cleaning, frugalness, things like that. All the same types of topics that are on the show. So we would love to have you there. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you like the show, and please leave me a review if you feel up to it. And that's it for today. Thank you again so much for listening, and I hope you have a really awesome day.